Welcome to Money Summit. My name is John Ogden, and we're here today with Sam Kilmer, a Senior Director at Cornerstone Advisors. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you. Good to be here, John.
Yeah. So, what do you think is the biggest thing that banks should be doing that they're typically not doing?
Well, from a marketing perspective, which is what we've been talking about here at the Financial Brand Summit, obviously, we see a lot more need to fight for resources. And so marketing is one area of the organization at most banks, most mid-sized banks, which is where Cornerstone focuses our consulting areas. We've really struggled to get the resources needed to really stand out and go up against the big banks and big disruptors. And so fighting for those resources is going to be really important to stand out in the crowd.
Okay, so it's a pretty big obstacle to overcome. What hope is there for a bank that is looking to solve that problem?
So for all the talk about technology, which is, certainly needs to be addressed, a lot of this gets down to strong leadership.
Okay.
And getting strong leadership in whether it's the chief marketing officer, others in the organization, collaboration between marketing executives, technology executives, all the way to the CEO. So that alignment is important. One of the things we've seen is, and certainly I've seen it in my engagements with mid-sized banks, is that what used to be sales or lending or retail and marketing and service, those 5-10 years ago were very different disciplines. And what's happening with, not just with technology, but with the consumer's expectations and business customers' expectations, is those disciplines are converging.
Yeah.
And so it's creating a real need for leaders that work across the shop, as opposed to just focus on their area of expertise.
Sure. So it sounds like this leader that you're talking about isn't necessarily the traditional leader. You're talking about somebody who also has a good grasp of technology, right? And so it's like somebody who understands banking and who understands where technology is going. Is that the kind of leader that you're saying when you refer to leadership?
Yeah, a real integrator, somebody that can tie together the conversations. Technology is no longer the domain of IT. So it used to be we would say, and banks would say, well, this is a technology issue. Let's get IT involved. So if you talk to an HR executive, what are they using every day? They're using LinkedIn. They're using other applications. You talk to a marketing executive, what are they using? They're using analytics. They're using more Google's AdWords, or they're using different applications to engage the member. So in different customers and members across the organization, how they pull all that together. The technology has essentially taken over lending. It's taken over all these different areas of the bank, and in turn, you cannot be an effective CLO, CMO without being tech savvy.
Okay, very interesting. So what do you think about the partnership with fintech and banks? Some banks are a little nervous, others aren't so much. What's your thought?
Well, I think the discussion around it has been very healthy. I think for some organizations, the partnership is a good deal. I think if nothing else, what the fintech, and I think specifically some of the disruptors, particularly around the lending, when they've been getting a lot of attention, lending and payments, but if we just focus on lending, for example, I think we need to be careful not to confuse any underwriting woes out there that have happened with experience. I think the fast loan decision and the fast funding, once there's a decision that's made, I think that ship has sailed, and the consumer and the business customer expects that. Doesn't mean that the bank has to write bad loans. It just means that they have to be faster in their turnaround and responsiveness.
Right.
And I think fintech's been healthy for that. I think a lot of mid-sized banks that I talk with, some of them might be considered a partnership, but if nothing else, bringing technology into their own shops that allow them to be competitively responsive to their customers, regardless.
Yeah. So what do you think is the biggest thing that banks need to keep their eye on? A lot has changed in the past 10 years, but what about the next 10 years? Like, what should they be focused on?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges and the biggest areas to push, an area we call the delivery redirect. So there's there's this notion that we're seeing that, well, I mean, our branches are going to get smaller if some of them don't go away, and while we're shifting resources into online, mobile, and other tech. I think that, okay, so transactionally, we've seen that. I think the struggle is how do we interact with customers better? So it's the sales cycle, the sales and marketing cycle, and how do we do that better digitally?
Yeah.
And the real struggle here, beyond the technology, as I said earlier about the resources, the real trick on this is how do we push across the bank to make sure that we are finding the resources that are being misallocated in some areas to reallocate towards things like digital marketing, outreach.
That's part of the leadership.
It's
Making those
part of the
decisions, saying,
hard
hey,
decisions.
We're gonna have to cut this back, allocate it here. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Good example. Our research director Ron Shevlin. We done quite a bit of research on this recently. One of the things we found is that for every billion in assets of a bank, what we found was that they're overspending on compliance by about 1.2 million a year.
Wow.
And at the same time, a typical $1 billion bank only has about $800,000 in their marketing budget. So if you're spending way overspending on compliance and not automating that, you're essentially taking resources away from something that then helps you go out and grow in the market and compete against the big banks and disruptors.
That's great. Well, thanks so much for joining us. It was really good to talk with you.
You as well, John.
Uh-huh.
Thanks.
Thank you.